Now, we also agree that tribes should have the right to take land in trust. Even though it removes that land from authority, all this land was originally Indian land. It was all taken. There's various federal policies. Some were designed to destroy Indian tribes. Others were designed to support and preserve Indian tribes. There's a policy from a law in the 1880s called the General Allotment Act, which President Teddy Roosevelt called a great pulverizing machine to destroy Indian tribes. And what that did is it gave each Indian family that applied 80 acres of land within a reservation in fee status, and then declared the remaining land surplus and available for non-Indian settlement. So between 1887 and 1934, in 1887, Indian tribes had 132 million acres of land in trust across the country. By 1934, they were down to 41 million acres. So they lost over 90 million acres of land during that period of time. So in 1934, the policy changed with Franklin Roosevelt. They passed the Indian Reorganization Act, and it allowed tribes to start getting some land back in trust to reverse this federal destruction policy. Not a lot of land has been obtained in trust, but that's how tribes get their authority back. And that's what Swinomish is doing, I think, as Will pointed out. Within their original reservation, all their land was allotted out. A lot of it was lost. It was protected from tax for 25 years, and then they were subject to tax. Most Indian people weren't familiar with taxes. A lot of them lost their land once it became taxable, and so a lot of the land on the reservation was lost to the tribe, and they're now trying to get some of that back. That's great, but now they're trying to expand their area. I think that's probably enough. We file FOIAs. The BIA is tired of this because when you file a Freedom of Information Act request, they only give you up to the date that you file it. You can't just say, keep giving us if new stuff comes in. So we file a new one every 2 months just to catch up on what's been happening in the last 2 months. And I think the county and city are doing that too. Oh, the final thing on the Constitution. So Swinomish has changed their proposed amendment on the territory. And what they're saying now is the current Constitution says the 1873 Executive Order Reservation. They wanted it to change it to the land reserved under the treaty, which was which was broad. So now they've changed it again to just say the Swinomish Reservation. And the BIA has signed off on that because they say it doesn't conflict with the letter they sent saying you can't expand your area. So they are going to go ahead with the Constitution Amendment, which tribes have a right to do. But they've tried to make it pretty clear that that doesn't mean it's an expanded area. That doesn't mean that Swinomish won't assert that it's an expanded area. But that's going forward soon.
Okay, well that was a lot of information, and I think we should thank all our guests for coming here and providing that. So I've collected a few questions, and some of them have already been answered. Let me go through a couple, and then after we're done with that, if there are more questions, we can take them. In my mind, the real question is, when is the nail in the coffin going to come on this issue? When are we, as property owners, going to be able to say to a potential buyer, don't worry, this issue is dead? Do we think it's months, years, decades?
Well, I could take it. The water rights issue that Commissioner Wiesen talked about, I think
we had meeting after meeting in the east part of the county, rooms just like this, you know, people just like you guys, and the question was, when are we going to get some certainty about our water? And it dragged on for years and years and years, and now there's certainty, there's no water. You're not the first folks to be in this position, and I think all of us understand how frustrating that is, and what a problem it is to have a piece of property and essentially have your title be unclear because of something totally out of your power and control. So we're taking it seriously. I guess that's all I can say, but we don't know.
Second question, will you provide information to property owners as it becomes available, and if so, through what mechanism?
Yeah, so we actually were just talking about this week, and I know that the county has an excellent, we've got a page set up on their website, right, that has links to information. And I think at the city level, we'd like to do the same thing so that we can share whatever information that we have. So you know, please check back in coming weeks on the city's website, and we'll try to get information out that way. Now, we're happy to provide information if you want to reach out to us directly. You know, we'll certainly talk with you and give you whatever information we have as well.
If property owners wish to take their own actions, what actions should they take and when?
I want to underscore what Commissioner Wiesen said, which is when we were back in Washington, D.C., depending on who we were talking to, when we talked to Larson's office and Tom Petty's office and the senators, but to make sure that they understand that this is an issue, because at least one of the congressmen said that he hadn't heard much on this since the Great Wolf Lodge thing, and so it really isn't on radar until they hear from community. So I think that grassroots, you know, the people in this room can, you know, write a letter, call in, tell their local aides, and just keep hammering it that this is an issue. And kind of in response to that first question is, how do we know when this issue is dead? Part of the problem is the lack of process here. The only reason we knew anything was through a FOIA request, Freedom of Information Act request. And so, even though it seems like we're always a few steps behind where Chairman Clattisby is with his planning. And so if there was an opportunity to change anything right now, I think you guys have to look at the new presidential administration and make some requests straight to the Secretary of Interior, who's a guy from Montana, might actually look at some of this maybe differently in terms of protecting property rights. So anyway, Washington, D.C. should be well aware of this because this is a federal issue.
I might also say reach out to your local legislators. When I knew in Columbia a month ago, they were pretty unaware too, because they're getting clear issues right now in funding our schools. So any of your elected officials, just get proactive.
That's where sending an email in, the address I mentioned will be good. It will give us a contact list so that we can start putting together some perhaps organized action. So please be sure to do that. It's very difficult to give people any other way. People have converted to cell phones, the phone numbers are often inaccurate.
So in terms of finality, the Samish tribe has a request to take the land across the street in trust. One of the requirements before they say yes is they have to decide whether that land is within the Swinomish reservation. So if they make that decision, it's been pending for 2 years, in favor of the Samish tribe, that will be a federal determination if the land is not within the reservation. The other thing just to keep in mind, and this applies to the Samish tribe as well as the Swinomish tribe, is under federal law, Indian tribes are immune from suit, unconsented suit. They cannot be sued without their consent. So, for example, one of the things we've thought about is we would sue the Swinomish tribe directly to address the question of history, but we cannot sue the Swinomish tribe unless they consent. they can't sue us without their consent. The county and the city cannot sue the tribes without their consent. So unfortunately, there's no way to sort of, and you can't sue tribes without their consent. So there's no way to really just go into court and say, let's get this decided. And that's part of the strategy they're following also.
The property owners need their own legal representation, separate from the county, the city, the Samish, the refineries, whoever. And if so, how do we find someone who's knowledgeable in this somewhat obscure area?
Can you get the mic, please, so we can hear your question?
Do property owners need their own legal representation as separate from the county, the city, the Samish, the refineries, whoever? And if so, how do we find someone who's knowledgeable in this somewhat obscure area of law who isn't already representing one or the other of the parties?
That's a good question, and you know, the attorneys sitting up here, we work for the organizations that we represent, and you know, obviously the county and the city acts in the best interest of the public, but it's never a bad idea, you know, if you're concerned about your property, you can certainly get somebody who can pay attention to these issues and help you understand how it might affect you individually. And there are attorneys, you probably have to go to Seattle to find somebody that practices Indian law. And I'm pretty sure not everybody in the state works for somebody in Skagit County. So I don't have names for you, but I know that there are attorneys who practice in the area of Indian law.
I did contact a couple of firms that they practice Native American law, and they all declined to participate, principally because they represent Indian interests and they don't want to be on the other side of the coin.
That's pretty common. So two things. First of all, lawyers are expensive. I don't know, that's probably not news, right? But the best thing you can do is get organized. Get organized. You're all similarly situated in this area, and all of you together chipping in some form is not going to be individually that expensive. Hiring individually your own lawyers, too expensive. And I think that at this point, you know, not giving you legal advice here, but at this point, just keeping informed, being kept informed is probably the most important thing you can do. We don't know what to do, so you know, I think that there's more information that's needed, but keeping on top of it is pretty critical. Secondly, the county, we've engaged the Von Briesen Roper law firm in Milwaukee. They are nationally known for opposing these kind of things, essentially. So we've got them on board, and they're giving us advice, and they're smart folks, and we're taking their advice into account. So.
And one of the things that makes it so complicated is, like was mentioned, you can't sue the tribe, and it makes it, so what is your legal advice going to be? So that's one of the reasons the county has hired the attorneys from Wisconsin, is because what they do is they help cities and counties dealing with reservation problems. That's what their specialty is, so that's one of the reasons we hired them.
Yeah, I don't have any more questions. Perhaps questions from the audience. It's going to be difficult for people to get out here and come up to the microphone, so please try to shout. I don't need that.
Okay. Complicated.
You're wondering why I called you all here this evening. When I bought my property, I bought a thing called insurance, deed insurance. And so that told me that there were no liens on our property. Now, it seems to me that that's where the attorneys are for us.
Title insurance.
Title insurance.
It excludes Native American issues. It specifically excludes Native American land rights issues. Next.
They didn't hear what you said, sir. They didn't hear what you said.
He was referring to title insurance as protection against perhaps this issue, and I pointed out in my research that title insurance specifically excludes Native American property rights.
It's not Native American property. It's our land, not the Native Americans. We bought
I
it, or my
understand.
grandparents
I'm just
bought it.
telling you what my title insurance company says, is that they will not deal with Native American property rights issues.
Okay, as a citizen of Skagit County, okay, my grandparents bought their piece of property out here in 1948, deed free. And I'm sure most of these people sitting here bought their property off of the reservation. Am I right? How many here bought property on the reservation? We all bought property off the reservation. Now, you people seem to be more concerned about your tax base than our rights. This is our land, not tribal land. If the tribe wants our land, buy it from us. Other than that, we live in Skagit County, not some other nation.
Okay, do we have any more questions?
The Point Elliott Treaty says that any Indian that brings alcohol onto the reservation or drinks on a reservation will be cut off from the annuity. So, since the Swinomish is bringing truckloads of alcohol in, why can't they be cut off from this river of money, federal money they're getting to bring up these issues?
I don't know if I want to touch that one, but, so, you know, you're getting into the technicalities under the treaty, which I won't spend too much time, so, but what happened is under the treaty, the United States agreed to pay the tribes for their land. They paid over a period of 20 years. It was like 2 cents an acre or something. So the annuity, I would say, I'd have to look at that, but the annuities they're talking about there are that 20-year payment period from 1859 to 1879, and those annuities are long gone. It also says that bad men on the reservation, meaning non-Indians who speed or do other things, will be taken out and tied to a stake, and the federal government will take care of you. So watch what you wish for in terms of applying the treaty.
And it says you can't take slaves anymore either, so I mean, it's a little archaic, but it's still the way it is. Best advice I heard tonight was contact your representatives and your senators and your congressmen.
I wonder if maybe the question answer. Could you comment on the extraordinary power that Clasby has as chief or chairman of all nearly 600 tribes in the United States? How that is affecting his influence?
Well, that's been something that we've been dealing with since his election, and he's actually the president of the National Congress of American Indians. And so he's also supposed to be the Samish representative as well. So it's a little bit kind of, I don't know, not the best representation that we've ever had. The good news is that his term is going to be up soon, and he'll have to run for one of the vice president seats, I guess, is typically what they do. But yes, he's definitely had the previous administration's ear with, I don't know if somebody saw the photos of him and President Obama together, so definitely had a connection there. I don't know that that connection still exists under the current administration. I would say no. But yeah, it's been something that our tribe's been dealing with for the last 4 years. So it seems that he's got folks' ears back.
He
He was voted into the position, right? From all the tribes.
From the Swinomish reservation over there to the national
So it's all about, it's all about spending time back east and working with other tribes and, you know, building your popularity base, just like if you were gonna run for the county commissioner's
By
spot.
networking and
Yes,
promising
exactly.
people to come out to the golf course and things.
well, that might have something to do with it. I don't know.
Can you hear me up there?
Sure.
Okay. Well, I'm not an attorney, that'll be painfully obvious here in a minute, but it seems to me that the thing that has this their empowerment off the scale is consolidated behavioral stress, grateful, which allow them to be a taxing authority, at least in theory. And in reading the decision, every synopsis I've read of it says that one of the main provisions of that case was that the tribe had to have ownership of at least 51% of the property before it could be removed from the tax roll. They own virtually nothing in the Shelter Bay area, the Columbia Dam area, other than some tribal members who actually own some peaceable homes. But am I wrong? I mean, has anybody looked into that? I mean, clearly the state was complicit in writing the regulations that allowed them to be a taxing authority, and we can see the end result of it. I mean, they're even beating up on the other tribes that have always been friendly to it. So, my question is anybody legally looking into their authorities to whether or not it's truly legal?
So as far as Shelter Bay goes and Columbia Dam, that is tribal land. The taxation, and I'm not sure if this is probably something the county commissioners could answer, but they actually own that land. It's leased from the tribe, so they are the taxing authority with this Great Wolf
Well,
Lodge
I
decision.
recognize that, but like I said, at least in my interpretation and other people that I know in the legal community's interpretation, the provision that allows the taxation authority to be granted to a tribe was that the property in question, the improvements, not the land, but the improvements had to be owned by 51% of, or 51% owed to the minimum by the tribe or by any partnership that they're involved in. I mean, am I wrong?
You want to have a go at this?
So I dealt with this when it first came up. The assessor brought it, or the auditor, rather. The issue with Great Wolf is there were a couple different possible interpretations that one can make out of that case. What it deals with is the idea that it's this Ninth Circuit court case that came forward out of the Great Wolf Lodge down in Centralia area. And basically the idea was that, well, the local county was trying to tax this property, this facility, on grounds that the leasehold, the improvements, the personal property, as opposed to the dirt, were not outright owned by a tribe. They were owned by an entity that was partially a tribe and partially an investor. So it was kind of it was a joint venture, that's what it was, with the tribe involved. And so the case said, no, you can't tax them. So that then, well, what do we do about Shelter Bay? We've got leasehold improvements that are owned by non-Indians. The state of Washington Department of Revenue issued a memorandum, and it said, you can't tax them. And that, well, okay, that's one possible interpretation. We kind of considered, do we want to litigate this? What do we do about this? But then we get this Department of Revenue interpretation. So that kind of slammed the door closed to any other interpretations, essentially. And so then we look at it as, this is effectively an illegal tax the county's now been collecting. Because we didn't have the right to collect it, the tribe did. The deal is, though, is the county collects taxes for all these junior taxing districts, the school district, the fire district, so on and so forth. we're just kind of a collector and a pass-through. It's essentially not our money. And so if there's a shortfall, the money has to be coughed up by those junior taxing districts, and some of them are small and they don't have huge budgets. O'Connor School District being the prime example in this situation. And so the concern is here, you got 900 non-Indian landowners that are leasing land, they own the improvements. We've been collecting taxes. They actually have the right now under Washington law to say, give me all that money back for the last 3 years. About $8 million. It would have absolutely devastated the O'Connor School District's budget. So what we did is approach Swinomish and said, look, I understand we're going to have to agree to disagree about whether this was right and what just happened here. But the bigger problem is we got to work together and we got to figure out how we have a stable revenue stream for the school district. And the Swinomish folks said, the attorneys said, yeah, great. We don't know anything about this. You know, this just came up. We weren't part of this case. So we took them at face value on that. And we negotiated essentially a handover. The solution was if anybody they passed an ordinance with a 3-year look back, so if anybody asked for their money back, they had to pay Swinomish, and there was a $500 fee. So that discouraged anybody from asking their money back. The point here was not sort of tax hijinks, it was to make sure we didn't defund the school district, which is a good thing. So as it turns out, Swinomish had actually been actively involved in pressuring the Department of Revenue and providing the language for this memorandum. We found out later through a public records request. You know, we also talked about, you know, we can't make you, but it is really going to play poorly if you divert this money for your own purposes instead of just passing it through at the same level to the school district. Yeah, right. No problem. We'll do that. Well, that's not what happened. So I think the lesson to take away from it is really, I think there's grounds to be concerned when you're told not to worry.
Actually, you hit on the second part of my question. Just like you indicated earlier that the BIA solicitors did the Swinomish's clever little change of language, who's to say that the people making the decision, the Department of Revenue, are correct? That they are applying the correct interpretation to it. After all, they're working for all of us. They're not just working for the tribe. Do we even know who it is that made the final victim that was all erosion? I mean, they actually were, they may have been, I'm not an attorney, as I said, but they may have been violating the law by literally sitting down with the Swinomish's attorneys to write the regulations. I mean, is anybody looking into that or pursuing it?
I don't think there's anything illegal about lobbying on all certain rules. I think there's some of the same folks have gotten in trouble with that, with some EPA money recently, but yeah, I think there's nothing wrong per se with lobbying. And but it's also important to recognize, you know, our society is becoming more and more complex, and these things that ultimately down the road, in hindsight, have great importance, they're often occurring at a really low bureaucratic level, and you have to be vigilant. I mean, Samish's story about a low-level clerk in the BIA disenrolling their entire tribe as a Native American tribe. That happened, you know, somebody in a cubicle somewhere in Washington, D.C. did that. So these things do happen at these bureaucratic levels. And it's like Mr. Dorsey said, you have to be vigilant.
Hi, my name is Andy Culbertson. I have got about 65 acres of land in right next to the Swinomish Reservation, as I see it. I've heard a couple things here. I don't know if I have so much of a question. I have a plea. I've heard of a lot of misinformation and a lot of emotion. I would say get some knowledge. Point Elliott Treaty is 4 pages long. It's easy to get. You can get it and read it, see what you think of yourself. I've been through a land fight already before the Growth Management Hearing Board. I got representation at that time because I thought it was valuable. I joined in with the county in that lawsuit. You're in for a dogfight. The Swinomish are a very astute group. They're probably one of the best legally based tribes as far as they know what the law is. They know how to work it. You can see that tonight, what's going on. I myself has found good representation. It's going to be money out the door. If you go the legal route, the earlier you do it, the better. I'd like to join in with other people of a like mind who want to protect their property rights because I don't want a piece of property where I don't have representation going back to. I can talk to Commissioner Weason about my problems and I have some recourse. I can vote them in or out. I don't have that if I'm on a reservation. So I don't want to have to go to tribal court to decide, what their local EPA regulations have done to my property. They have a lot of power on a reservation. I chose not to buy property on a reservation for a reason. Does not mean I'm opposed to the Swinomish. I've worked with them on some salmon enhancement, salmon recovery stuff. I work with them all the time, but I see this as a different issue. So get informed. That's what I would do. I plead for that, and I thank you for all coming here and giving some information out.
What's the downside? They get everything they want, what's our downside? Let's say that let's say that they want to get the tax revenue off of Is that my downside? Is my downside they're going to come in one night and say you don't live here anymore, get out? Is that my downside?
Well, currently they've got to buy your property, so they have to buy it, correct. But we thought things were settled with the Great Wolf Lodge decision in Shelter Bay. We thought that was all settled when they formed that, they went forward.
All right, so my downside is they have to buy my property?
The downside is we have no idea what the rules are going to be going forward.
I don't care what the regulation. I'm talking about if you've got $1 million, if you've got $1 million of dirt, okay, and you're getting water from Anacortes. What is the downside?
Yeah, we need to engage you.
Okay, so anyway, what I was asking is, what is the downside? I get water from Anacortes. Let's say the dirt's worth $1 million, however, or $500,000 or it's worth $10 million, doesn't matter what the number is. If all we're arguing about is who I send my property tax to, I don't see that losing a lot of sleep over that. These guys got to worry about that.
Wait until you try to do something with it.
So that's what I'm asking. What is the downside? And then this gentleman said they would have to buy your property. All right, so great. I'd rather sell it to them than fight them in court over it.
There are ways to make use of your property difficult without having to pay you for it. So, for example, depending on where you're located and what roads the tribe may own, they can deny you access to the property. They can limit your use of it, regulating it. Say the tribes have the right to be declared same level as the state for clean water and clean air, which could shut the refineries down, theoretically, depending on what they do. It's hard to know. It takes a creative mind, and as someone said, Swinomish has a good legal team and other team, and I think it would be a constant issue about what might happen to your property.
That sounds more like a scare tactic than an answer.
Well,
Attention, number one. With the tribe, you have no rights. When you own your property, you're like, you can vote the commissioner out, you can vote the mayor out. You have rights as a member in the county. If you don't, you won't have those same rights. But for me, that would be the big thing. To your point on property rights, I mean, we're not here just to pay taxes. we're here because we represent our youth. And we truly care about your investment in this county and in the city, so.
And I think one of the points people need to keep in mind isn't necessarily just who your taxes are paid to, it's how much your taxes are. You may not have anything to say about how much your taxes are anymore.
Unlike now.
If taxation without representation isn't a problem for you, it's been a big problem since that founding of our country. I mean, it's kind of this important principle. The other thing is you have to remember what you're talking about is a vertically integrated government and business. We have the power to regulate your land, and now we're going to buy it from you. Heavily regulated, what's it worth now? We'll give you 50 cents on the dollar. It has an impact. Regulations have an impact. You can 10x the value of land by changing the zoning. You can render it virtually worthless by saying all you can do on it is have wetlands. I mean, that stuff matters to the value of your property. That's the implication. That's one of the big implications. There's that letter that a group of landowners sent out, Summit Park Estates. That was excellent. Whoever sent that up, did you write that?
Well, our neighborhood.
Well, good team effort, because I think it really did a good job of laying out what the concerns are. Now, are all of those things going to come to fruition? I don't know, but it's possible, so.
So from the little bit that I've heard here tonight, it sounds like both the city and the county are kind of playing catch up. I mean, whether it's lack of disclosure, lack of the freedom of information requests that have to be made on a continual basis, but it sounds like we're a little bit behind the 8 ball. What can the city and the county do, suggesting that we can talk to our legislators and elected officials? I get that, but what can the city and the council do to get proactive and get a step or two ahead of this process so that we're not fighting to catch up all the time?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and I think part of it is the same thing that you all should do, which is to get informed and understand what's going on. You're correct that we're playing catch up because we don't necessarily know everything that's happening. I'm sure that we participate in each of those processes. So being proactive for us looks like getting our feelers out and making sure that we're gathering and processing and paying careful attention to as much information as we possibly can, and then commenting and participating in the federal processes as it's appropriate.
My concern is the sovereignty. Can you tell me that? Mr. Dorsey talked about sovereignty for me. What's that about you?
My name is Mary Chatfield, I live on 8712 South March Point Road, and I've lived there for 34 years. Speaking of wetlands, I know them, and I didn't plant them there. But I wanted Mr. Dorsey to speak about is sovereignty and how this Indian sovereignty is taking our rights away. And that's all I have to say, thank you.
Well, this is where I guess I have to disagree with you in terms of I'm a tribal advocate in things. So Indian tribes, you may not know this from your social studies or your constitutional history class in school, but there are 3 sovereigns mentioned in the U.S. Constitution: states, the federal government, and Indian tribes. So they're recognized there, they're mentioned in several different places, the treaty provision. So Indian tribes predated the Constitution, so they're not, and they weren't part of the constitutional bargain, so they're not subject to the U.S. Constitution. They are inherent sovereigns just the way any other nation is, like France or Germany. What the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled is that they lost some aspects of their sovereignty, have been reduced by implication because of the the overarching, the superior sovereign is the federal government. But what happened was, this is getting in the Articles of Confederation, which was first before the US Constitution, they left the authority over Indian tribes with the states, and it didn't work. Because Indian tribes didn't respect state boundaries, there were wars and things, so in the US Constitution, divest states of virtually all authority over Indian tribes. It's with the federal government. That's where the relationship is. But tribes have this inherent sovereignty. They haven't given it up. They're not taking anything away. They are preserving as much of their sovereignty as they can. And there's been policies, as I said, they've been attacking. Samish has been subject to every negative federal policy since the founding of this country. And yet they've still survived, so, but that's my perspective.
Just a little bit about where I'm coming from. I have, Irish, mostly, ancestors, but I also have some Jewish from Poland. And both suffered greatly at the hands of the greater political structure. And they would write laws to legalize their genocide. So I don't have a lot of respect for what's legal. I'm more motivated by what's ethical and what's just. And I myself suffered greatly during my school years being autistic. So I have a heart for the underdog. And I have a number of Native Indian friends and contacts, not so much amongst the Swinomish, but in the Samish. I'm also well aware with how resentments can become generational and grow and build over time. And so I would urge that whatever we do here between those up front, that it's not done from anger, it's not done motivated by money, but more along the lines of just and ethical, taking into consideration that generations down the line will have to deal with the outcome of it. I have a lot of respect for the Native American Indians, and I even have respect for the lawyers here, because my wife was a lawyer. My daughter-in-law clerked for the Supreme Court for a year and is now a professor of law in Virginia. But still, I'm more motivated about what is just and what is right. And I hope both sides take into consideration the other side and not creating division between Native and white. That's pretty much it.
Do we have any more questions?
The refineries involved have they expressed concern, and they helping the city and the county in their process?
Yes. I'm in contact with the legal counsel for both Show and Tesoro. They're concerned about it, they're monitoring it. Again, there is no appealable action, essentially, that's happened yet. So we're all in the same boat here, whether it's the refinery in the county, you guys are watching, and we're waiting. So I also I wanted to mention a thing about sovereignty. You know, sovereignty gets a lot of usage. That term. What does that mean? And it means that, you know, many things, but the right of self-determination and self-governance and determining your own future for Native American tribes. But ultimately, you know, the rubber meets the road with specific policies, and those also have to be viewed through constitutional due process that all of you have, property rights. It has to be viewed through fundamentally, what's fair for the community, and what are we gonna see as fair, what are our children gonna see as fair in terms of how we pay for things, and how we share the burden of essentially civilization, roads, schools, bridges, police, fire. And so, and that's what I come back to, what I said initially, this is about ultimately a philosophical difference. We have most of the tribal entities in our county support the vision of all of us pitching in together. Now they have rights that, as entities that others don't. The right to engage in gaming through the processes that they've negotiated in fishery rights, although Samish, by the way, don't have most of these fishery rights because of some of these historical, essentially, accidents. But